because I'm about 30 weeks now. But yeah, anyway, but all good. Thanks.
Yeah, all is good.
Okay, shall we begin, Bu Novi?
Yeah, Mas Aris.
Okay. Good morning. Our session is about to begin. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Welcome to Roundtable 5. This roundtable will be held in room Antasena 2, 3, and 4. For the next 1 hour together, we will discuss about academic and scholarly publishing in Asia. Without further ado, allow me to invite Ibu Novianti Putri Indrasari from Brin Publishing as our chair for today. Ibu Novi, the virtual floor is yours now.
Thank you, Mas Hari. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's roundtable discussion, Academic and Scholarly Publishing in Asia. First of all, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Novi. I am one of the editor in National Research and Innovation Agency, or BRIN Publishing, and I will be the chair of this panel today. Ladies and gentlemen, the effort to produce articles and books and internationally referred journals and publication has become a major concern for a new generation of researchers and academics and various science disciplines, including social science. Southeast Asia government has invested more in R&D to make the more academic knowledge production intensive. Collaboration and co-authorship is a helpful ways for young scholars and non-English speaking countries to get started in publishing. And this panel will bring opportunities for academics and scholars in Southeast Asia, especially with more knowledge from reputable international publication on how to find the right place to publish your paper, open access, digital platforms, and indexes. We hope that this panel will motivate researchers, authors, and also academicians to produce international scientific books and a well-known global publishing houses. Besides, it's also expected that the participant of this panel will gain knowledge for preparing a better manuscript and also book proposal. And hopefully, a global publishing network can be strengthened through this panel. Ladies and gentlemen, before we get started, I'd like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's event. The first one, there will be two sessions. The first one is the presentation from each panelist, and we have 4 panelists here. And the second one is the Q&A session. Each panelist will have 10 minutes for a presentation. And for the participant, you will have the opportunity to submit questions through the WebEx chat. You may send in your question at any time during the presentation. We will collect and address them during the Q&A session. Now, without further ado, we will turn the time over to our first panelist, Miss Alex Westcott Campbell from Springer, Southeast Asia. Miss Alex is a senior publishing editor at Springer in the Humanities and Social Sciences. She is also oversees the Global Linguistics list. She is interested in receiving book proposal for monographs, edited volumes, reference works, textbook, and new book series from Southeast and East Asia. And today, she will talk about the book publishing in the humanities and social sciences in Asia. Please welcome Miss Alex. Alex, you have 10 minutes for your presentation.
Thanks, Novi. Thanks for the introduction. All right, I've just shared my screen, so let's hope you can all see it. Can you see my first slide?
Yes.
Great. So thank you for the introduction, and I know we each have 10 minutes. So what I'm going to be doing is just talking a little bit about the Asian Humanities and Social Sciences program at Springer. and also to introduce Springer Nature and how we're organized, because we're also home to Palgrave Macmillan, which also publishes in humanities and social sciences. So without further ado, let me do that. And as I mentioned, I'm handling the Springer list specifically, but Springer Nature is comprised of several different brands, including Macmillan Education, Scientific American, the Nature Journal, Biomed Central, and again, as I mentioned on the HSS side, Palgrave Macmillan as well. So if you are interested in publishing in HSS, the logical contact points within the company would be myself in the Asia list on the Springer side, and my colleagues who are the commissioning editors at Palgrave Macmillan, two of whom sit in Singapore, and also one in Shanghai. On the humanities and social sciences side. So if you're interested in discussing your book proposal with any one of us, you can contact me first, and then I can introduce you if you'd like to discuss your book proposal with Palgrave. We're also working on several partnerships that work across imprints. So some of our book series now are not only restricted to one particular brand, but are also working across different brands. So you can publish in a particular series, but also publish perhaps with a different brand if you're interested in doing so. I'm just going to quickly give you an overview of our books program globally. We are one of the largest academic book publishers in the world. We're publishing across disciplines, as Springer is sometimes misconceived as a predominantly STEM publisher, but we have a very strong program in HSS as well. We're publishing around 13,000 new books each year. That's globally across disciplines. We have more than 300,000 books available to readers on our content platforms and our online bookshop. We are pioneers, or proud to be pioneers in digital book publishing. So we offer books in the electronic formats alongside the print version as well. So we work on a print demand basis because we know that some markets, and I think Indonesia is one of them, still value print. So yeah, again, your book will never go out of prints in that sense because we have the print on demand model. Springer Link, which is where all our content is hosted, regardless of which imprint you're publishing with, receives around 285 million visits per year. So what we're really offering here is an extensive network through our e-collection, institutional access points, which is where the bulk of our content is read. I'm going to just highlight a few of the publications that we have, which may be of interest to your participants today. And the first is a relatively new journal launched by Nature Communications. And again, as I said, HSS is mostly located between the Springer and Palgrave brands, particularly on the book side. But Nature is also now doing HSS work and have transformed the original Palgrave Communications Journal to the Nature Communications Humanities and Social Sciences, or should I say Humanities and Social Sciences Communications. This is a fully open access journal. They're still inviting board members or applications for editorial board members at the moment because the journal was only launched in, I think, mid to late 2020. So if you're interested and you think you'd be a good candidate for the board, please write to me and I can send you that information. They're publishing across HSS, including psychology and behavioral science. As I mentioned, it's fully open access and it has recently been indexed in Web of Science, SSCI. Since we are, of course, having the conference in Indonesia, although we're not there in person, I also wanted to highlight our co-publishing arrangements that we have out of the Asia list with Brin Press, formerly Lippy Press. And Novia, I'm so glad that you're moderating today because, of course, we worked together for several years now. And this is under IKAPI, the Indonesian Publishers Association, and we have partnerships with 3 local Indonesian presses, publishing their works from translation from Bahasa into English. So our other partners include OBOR as well as UGM Press in Yogyakarta. And these are just some of our recent books that we've published with Brim Press, From Colonization to Nation State. This is formerly under Lippy before the transformation to Brim Press. The forthcoming Gender and Politics in Post-Reformasi Indonesia. With OBOR, Civic Engagement in Asia, which is due to be published next month. And again with Brim Press, ASEAN Maritime Security, which is also forthcoming, hopefully soon. I also wanted to draw your attention to just some of our book series that might be of interest to your participants today. These are some of our general HSS Asia-focused book series. The first is Asia in Transition. This book series is based out of the University of Brunei. It's recently signed quite a large open access partnership, and so we're publishing a lot more books open access in this book series. It's also recently been indexed in Scopus, I think about 2 years ago, so not that recently. We also have Communication, Culture and Change in Asia, also indexed in Scopus, Mobile Communication in Asia, also indexed in Scopus, based out of Singapore, SUTD. We have Quality of Life in Asia, looking at quality of life and well-being studies more generally, which was indexed in Scopus last year. And we have some new offerings as well, one being Global Vietnam, Across Time, Space and Community. This is a brand new series, so sorry, the book cover is not finalized yet. It's really in process. And they're also going to be, well, all our books are by nature hybrid series, but they are also going to be doing quite a few open access titles, and a new series from the University of Tokyo's Institute of Studies on Asia. Again, they're also doing some open access work. So please take a look at some of the book series we have. We do publish books as standalone titles as well as in book series, and they have slightly different peer review processes. But again, it is always a good idea to also contact the series that you might be interested in when you're developing your book proposal for some initial feedback. I'm not going to go into great detail in this on this at this point, because at the end of this presentation, I've included a QR code, which will take you to the book proposal form and information about how to submit your book proposal. Suffice to say, these are the steps, and I can share these slides with the participants or with the conference organizers if you'd like to take a look at them in more detail afterwards. But yeah, from the proposal, we have at proposal stage, we have 2 rounds of external review. And at manuscript stage, we have 2 rounds of external review. The publication timeline from the point that the final manuscript is submitted is around 3 months, and then the book will be available in print and ebook formats. I just want to sort of conclude before I hand over to my colleagues and peers in publishing from the region that we are going to be publishing the proceedings from this conference. So it's Managing Disruption and Developing Resilience for a Better Southeast Asia, the 4th SEASIA Biennial Conference. And some of the guidelines, these are already included in the conference program on the website, are submissions of around 6,000 words per paper. It only applies obviously to authors who are presenting their papers at the conference, and the proceedings is due to be published by end of the year. What's also very exciting about this proceedings, and generally in my list we haven't published many proceedings, we mostly do edited volumes and monographs as well as reference works, is that we are starting to do more selected proceedings in humanities and social sciences, and this volume is set to be fully open access, which is fantastic, because we find that open access does lead to, well, obviously much higher downloads being in the public domain, and also to generally 50% more citations. So please, if you're interested in submitting your paper, do look at the guidelines which are included on the website. I'm just going to end with this graphic that I love that Springer commissioned a few years ago on the book publishing process. As we know, can be quite a long process. It's a detailed process, but we're here to support you. So if you have any questions, please email me. And here's a QR code to where you can find all the additional information on the book proposal and how to submit. So please drop me an email, and I'd be happy to have a discussion with you about your book plans. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alex, for your presentation. Actually, you still have 2 minutes left.
Oh, do I?
Yeah.
We have 10 minutes each. Okay.
Okay. But yeah,
Anyway, I think I'll hand over time for questions.
Yeah. We will have the Q&A session later on. So I will get back to you later on, Alex.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, for you who have just joined our roundtable discussion, welcome to our roundtable. And for today's topic, it's the academic and scholarly publishing in Asia. And now for the next agenda, we also have another speaker from the National University of Singapore, Mr. Peter Soffert. And I think Mr. Peter has joined us.
Hi.
Hi, how are you today, Mr. Peter?
Very good, very good. Yes, so we're going from the world's largest academic publisher to one of the world's smallest. So I hope you don't get whiplash.
No, no, it's
NUS
interesting.
Press started in the 1950s as part of as an important initiative of the then new University of Malaya. And it was very much seen as important to the task of knowledge creation and knowledge certification from the newly independent or soon to be independent territories of Malaya. We've been participating in the SEASIA conferences since the first one in 2015 in Kyoto. And we do so partly because we're very sympathetic to the questions of perspective and position that's built into the conference and the association that supports us, the Consortium for Southeast Asian Studies in Asia. So the question of location is right there in the name. And that raises the question immediately then, how will Southeast Asian studies in Asia be different than Southeast Asian studies outside Asia? Different priorities, different concerns, different methodologies. How are the audiences different? So as I said, we're a small university press. We do about 20 books a year, and we have 2 journals. So we can really only accept a fraction of the proposals that we receive. We accept about 1 in 10 proposals that we receive. And obviously that means we are not able to publish a lot of very good proposals that we get. So we have to think very hard, because we're small, we have to think very hard about what to publish, and these questions of position and audience and public. Actually, we think about those as much, even more, than the measure of quality in the submission. And so I thought I would use this as an opportunity to bring those 2 discussions together, the SEASIA discussion of Asian studies in Asia, and how we choose our books in terms of audience, and bring that together and tell you a little bit more about it. And then if I have time, I'll tell a few stories about specific books that fit some of these criteria.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
You don't have. Do you have any?
No slides,
PowerPoint?
waving hands.
Oh, okay,
And
okay.
then,
Okay.
I have a few visual aids, maybe.
Okay, great. Okay, just to make sure. Okay.
Yeah,
please
yeah,
proceed.
absolutely. I thought 10 minutes we'd just talk. So most publishers, in their submission form will ask authors to tell them about the audience that they imagine for their books. We ask them about the target audience. In preparing this talk, I realized I better change that. I think we better take the word target out, because it seems to take the poetry a little bit out of the question, because it is a kind of poetic question, right? When you're writing your book, who do you imagine is your ideal reader? I think that's a very important question. Writing a book, even if it's from your PhD, is not a simple process, and it requires that energy that comes from imagining that. So to answer that question, many authors will invoke the general reader, or the intelligent or the informed general reader. My book will be of interest to specialists in this very specific subject, and the informed general reader. Well, I'm sorry to say that the informed general reader is a bit of a mythical creature. It's kind of like the orang pendek. There might be a few somewhere in the hills, but they don't really come into the bookshops very often. But of course, because the general reader is too general, readers are interested and care about things. So that's the question we're trying to get at. And we understand why you say the general reader. I mean, first of all, most authors do want to speak to audiences beyond their fellow specialists. And as a university press, we are, the model is different than some of the other presses that you'll hear from, where our goal is to, we're very much interested in the wider public sphere, not just the audience of specialists. So we support scholarly communication, but we also transmit university knowledge and ways of thinking about the world beyond the university. And the university supports us on that model, even though that might not always be sustainable on purely business grounds. So how do we imagine that public beyond the university? It's quite a slippery question, this question of the public. I recommend here a book by a social theorist, Michael Warner, called Publics and Counterpublics, published by Zone Books in 22. The public for a book consists of those who have read it, who talk about it, and who talk about it even if they haven't read it. Also a very important group. Warner says A public is a space of discourse organized by nothing other than discourse. A public address exists by virtue of being addressed. So the art of publishing, as I tell our interns every year, is actually the art of creating publics. We nurture a book, an address, a communication which imagines and so creates a public. And we edit our books and we design book covers and plan marketing for the book to try to sharpen and focus that imagination of a public. And then what we do what we can to attract, to actualize, to stabilize and grow that public once the book is out in the world. It is a little bit of a circular definition, so no extra points if your book submission to us says, my target audience is the people who will read this book. But it is an act of imagination. We, the author and the publisher, we imagine a readership. We present the book and try to connect the readers with that book. Now, an important thing about publics in this conceptualization of publics is that they're self-organized and self-creating. They come into being through discourse, right? It's not you're told to read this book, you're told to read that book, the government says you must read this, your teacher says you must read that. To be a member of a public is to choose, right, what you want to read and talk about. And it's that independence of choice outside of your identity as a member of a group that gives the public sphere energy, right, that powers this whole scholarly communication discourse. It's a very precious thing, that energy of the public sphere. It's the power of choice that makes you feel good when you enter a good bookshop. And it's one that, a good bookshop, you know, is one that flatters you by presenting you with very interesting choices that said, hey, you have the mind that can take in all of these different ideas. So, and U.S. Press seeks to create not necessarily large publics, but publics that reach as widely as possible. And so what does that mean in practical terms? Well, first we look for books that reach beyond the narrow specialty. We're looking to build publics across academic disciplines. Particularly, say, history that anthropologists will read with pleasure and get something from, and vice versa. Writing that is only of interest in a narrow specialty, which is addressing very sharp disciplinary concerns, that's not really for us. Now, it doesn't mean it's not good. It became fantastic, right? But it doesn't suit our model because that book is probably going to be read just by specialists and probably is best for a publisher that is only focusing on getting books into libraries, institutional libraries. We address audiences, so that's the one thing. We're looking for books that cross disciplines, that build a public within the scholarly community, but across publics and disciplines. And then we're looking for audiences that mix scholars and other audiences outside the academy. And here in particular, we look for communities of practice, those that have a strong interest in academic pursuits. We've been publishing quite a bit of art history recently, for example, and we find that those books are also of interest to museum workers, heritage workers, independent curators, and so on. When we publish a book on politics, we hope that it will be of interest to journalists and members of civil society, as well as political scientists, strictly speaking. We're now developing a series on life writing because we find life writing, autoethnography, autobiography, has the potential to integrate so many different groups into its public in interesting ways. And the personal element, I think, stimulates writers to think about their publics more deeply. We have a book coming soon, which is a life writing of a biography of Ong Hong Kam, the Indonesian historian, which I think is a very interesting way of writing about a life.
Mr.
Yep.
Peter, sorry to interrupt you. You have 1 minute left.
1 minute more. Okay. So I think the other point, the last point I wanted to make is that the public we're looking for is one which is grounded in the region. Now, that doesn't mean we publish books by local authors only, or that we only circulate our books in the region. Far from it. We work very hard to have a global circulation. We're in 600 bookshops around the world, and e-forms and print forms. But we need books that have a public in the region. If it's a book that just explains Southeast Asia to an audience in the UK or the US, that's not for us. If it's just a book which tries to, interpret social reality against some theoretical construct, that's not really for us. We want a book that is involved and that has a public, people who care about the subjects discussed within the region. So I think I'll end there just to say that, our website, I'll put the website address in the chat. You can find more about us there. And thank you very much for the opportunity to speak and share some of these ideas with you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Peter. There are a lot of things, a lot of interesting things, but maybe we will discuss them later.
Okay.
Now we will continue to our next speaker, but before that, I'd like to invite to all the participants to send your questions. You can write down your questions in the WebEx chat, and we will address them later on in our question and answer session later on. And for the next speaker, we have, for the next panelist, I would like to introduce Ms. Narumi Shitara from Center for Southeast Asian Studies, Kyoto University Publisher, as our third speaker.
Thank you.
Yep. But before that, but I'd like to introduce about Ms. Narumi Sitara first before we go to her presentation. Ms. Narumi Sitara is the head of editorial office, and she has been managing editors of Southeast Asian Studies and Japanese Journal of Southeast Asian Studies since 2011. Her research interest is bulletin journals published by Japanese university and research institutes. And for her topic today is to find a good outlet of your paper. I think it's a very interesting presentation. So, Ms. Narumi?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll begin. Thank you very much for the opportunity to attend this exciting panel. I am Narumi Shitara of the Center for Southeast Asian Studies of Kyoto University in Japan. As the managing editor of the Center's journal, Southeast Asian Studies, today I'd like to review some issues concerning open access journals and journal indexes that young scholars should be aware of when seeking an outlet for their work. Could you please change the page? Please. Thank you. The next page. Thank you. Journal publishing has changed dynamically in recent years. A variety of journals have emerged, including those that publish reprints, that contents of open peer review, and those that require publication of research data. In Japan, there is now a lot of talk about F1000, a new platform that combines reprint publishing and open peer reviewing. Although in many ways, the proliferation of outlets has made it easier to publish and to reach wider audiences, perhaps now more than ever, it is critical to investigate each journal fully before submitting to. Could you please change the page? For young authors, visibility may be a especially important criterion for selecting a journal to submit to. In this sense, open access journals are attractive. In fact, researchers are divided on whether open access will increase citations. However, open access outlets are also important in that they enable the sharing of research results beyond the academy. Increasingly, the grant funding reprints that research results be open access. Although various types of open access journals exist, recently gold open access journals, or those that charge authors article processing charges, are on the rise. This has contributed to an increasing number of predatory journals or outlets that charge fees but do not check articles for quality or provide sufficient peer review and editing. To increase the revenues, predatory journals fish for articles inviting authors to submit papers with a theme similar to that which they have already published in another journal, resulting in duplicate submissions. Could you please change the page? Numerous guidelines exist to help authors to avoid questionable journals. I pick up some useful resources here. Julia Klim stresses the following 2 points when selecting journals. First, check if the journal has a strong link with non-professional organization. And the second one, check if the editorial boards include established leaders in the field covered by the journal. These are very concise and important checkpoints. However, we also need to be mindful of hijacked journals. Such journals hijack another journal's website, including the name of the journal and other details, and recruit authors to submit to the fake journal. At first glance, authors may not realize that the journal has been hijacked, but upon closer inspection, they will notice that the quality of the papers carried by the hijacked journal are different from the original journal. I include one example of the hijacked journal and the original journal. The only way to detect such predatory practices is to check the validity and editing level of the journal's articles. Authors' carefulness is required here. Certainly, major databases such as WOS, Web of Science, and Scopus act as whitelist of trustworthy journals, but as Gwen Duck et al. Caution, problematic journals are sometimes included in these databases. Such databases also have their limitations. For example, Directory of Open Access Journals, namely DOAJ, is considered the best whitelist of open access journals. As a Japanese ambassador of DOAJ, I would like to stress that DOAJ carefully reviews all the journals it selects to index. However, I would like to add one point. Although the number of Japanese journals indexed in DOAJ is increasing, but the total number remains small. This is because even though many Japanese journals offer free access, but they do not have a clear reuse policy. They do not have prepared a clear policy yet, such as Creative Commons license used in Western countries. And they cannot respond to DOAJ's request for a clear statement of reuse yet. As this example shows, it is difficult to assume that the journal is flawed or low quality just because it is not included in the databases, major databases. In short, there is no perfect whitelist, and authors themselves need to carefully to investigate each journal they are considering submitting to. Journal indexes are also important for authors in that they provide useful indicators such as impact factor or site score. However, we should bear in mind that some studies have pointed out that journals listed in these indexes are not free from bias, for example, in terms of languages, countries in which they are published, or the regions of authors. Therefore, it is very important to remember that depending on the situation, journals that are not indexed may be perfectly suitable for your submission. Okay, among the plethora of advice out there, I'd like to highlight to investigate journals and not depend on indexes too much when selecting which journal to submit to. Speaking from my own experience, I suspect that some authors to our journal do not spend much time on this point. For example, we sometimes receive submissions beyond our scope in terms of the research method or region. When I see the phrase, I'd like to submit my paper to a Scopus indexed journal in a submission cover letter or the inquiry, I suspect that the index is more important than our journal for the author. We believe that efforts to learn about journals are important, not only in terms of selecting appropriate journals, but also in terms of smooth peer review process. I would like to stress the importance of the author knowing their own aim as well. For example, which audience do they want to reach? Or do they want to engage with researchers only in their own field, or with researchers across many disciplines or geographical regions, etc.? Such efforts will lead to a more appropriate match to the journal that is best suited for their specific paper. At the end, as a concluding remark, there is no royal law to selecting perfect journal to submit to. Despite the recent dynamic changes in publishing, the best way to choose where to publish is the same as it has always been, to get to know the journal as well as your own aim. That's all. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Narumi, for your presentation. I think it's an interesting topic, yeah, and it's also become another problem here in for our researcher, how to select the most appropriate journal to send our manuscript. But maybe we will talk in detail later in the question and answer session. So thank you very much, Ms. Narumi.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, and ladies and gentlemen, I know you must have been so curious and maybe already have a lot of things to ask to our speaker, but please hold on because we still have the last speaker. And I'll invite Miss Kathy Peace from Taylor and Francis. She will present about publishing books or book chapters with Routledge. But before that, I'd like to introduce her background. So Miss Kathy is the senior editor for books for Taylor and Francis in the Asia Pacific. She is based in Singapore and managed the Routledge, especially Humanities and Social Sciences and CRC Press editors in Asia and Australasia. With more than 19 years experience in the publishing industry globally, she has insight into the academic books and journal publishing processes and specializes in advising and also guiding authors to produce the best publishing output. So I think we can learn more from Miss Kathy on how to prepare our book manuscript so that the publisher will eagerly to publish our manuscript. I think that's for the introduction, and I'll hand over to Miss Kathy. Miss Kathy, you have 10 minutes for your presentation.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. I hope you can see my screen okay. I'm just prepared a few slides this morning. Thank you so much for the introduction. And I'm going to speak a little bit about Taylor and Francis as a publisher. I'll focus mostly on books, but I do have journals experience. I can speak to our journals publishing program if you have questions at the end as well. And I will talk about us as a publisher, but some of the advice and suggestions I have for you today can be used to publish with any large publisher. So hopefully I can give you some suggestions of how you can choose a publisher, a little bit about open access, and I'll give you some information about how to contact us at the end. Okay, so who are we? So Taylor and Francis is the kind of bigger organization, and we have a number of different subdivisions that cover various things, such as our STEM book publishing program, which is under CRC Press, Routledge, which is our humanities and social sciences books imprint, F1000, Dove Press, which are two of our open access journals divisions. F1000 came up in the earlier presentation. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. So we've been around since 1852, so a really long time. We acquired Routledge in 2003 to become one of the top 5 global research publishers. And we publish around 7,000 new books every year and 2,700 journals. So obviously we're a very big publisher. And we're one of the world's largest open access publishers. So I'll talk a little bit more about that later on. So Routledge, as I said, is our humanities and social sciences books imprint. So that's where all of our social science books come under. It was founded by George Routledge in 1836. So again, it's been around for more than 200 years-ish. We're considered to be the leading English language publisher for social science and humanities. And we publish all different types of books. So we publish research books, textbooks, and professional books. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. We have offices in 18 countries around the world. In Asia, we have offices here in Singapore, we have offices in Indonesia, we have offices in Japan, in Korea, in China, in Australia. I'm sure I'm missing a few other places, Korea. So we're well represented in Asia. And my job as the senior publisher is to look after the publishing needs of the authors based in Asia. So I work on my own list of books, but I also manage the editors across all the different subject areas. So I'm your sort of central point of contact. And my job and the team's job is to try and encourage authors like yourselves to think about publishing with a big publisher and to consider an international publisher for your work, because our role is to try and help your fantastic research get out there to be seen by an international publishing community. So as I say, we have offices all over the place, but we provide local editorial support. So Simon hopefully won't be cross with people putting this photo up of him on our presentation, but we have a specific Asian studies editor called Simon Bates, who couldn't be here, unfortunately, because he's actually hosting his son's birthday party right now. But he would love to have been here, and that's his email address there. So he is also your kind of local editorial support. He's often traveling without COVID restrictions in parts of Asia, and he's a real expert in this area. He's trying to build our Asian Studies program to be one of the top ones for the company. So there's lots going on there. So we have really local editorial support here who can guide you through the process and are really supportive in trying to help you get your book published. But we do also offer, obviously, the global sales and marketing reach. We can be in all the places that you might want your book to be. We can do all of the e-marketing, listservs, all the different things. We can provide you fantastic marketing material. We have a fantastic copy editing program, which will help edit and make sure that your book looks beautiful. We obviously have a high quality production program, and all of our books are available in hardback, in print to buy, as well as ebook as well. So I just want to go on to talk a little bit about how you might choose a publisher. And one of the first things to think about is who you're writing your book for. Some publishers, as Peter was talking about, look at different audiences for their books. We do publish for all the audiences, but it's important for you to know when you're thinking about your book and what your book's going to be, who you're going to be approaching. So researchers are one of the fundamental audiences you might be looking to publish for. And particularly if you're thinking of doing a monograph or working from your PhD to produce something, your first book, then you're probably writing for other researchers to help further the field. So I've given a couple of examples of some of our books here. Monographs, you might also do an edited collection, which is a number of different chapters that you all work on together. So there's one editor or two editors who might be pulling together a collection of chapters on a particular theme, and you're all going to publish that together. So it's a lot easier than writing a book on your own. So that's something to consider, and I can answer questions about that at the end. We do also offer a shorter form monograph. So the Routledge Focus, which is there, the red bar at the top, is a Routledge Focus. Those are books, so around 25,000 words up to 50,000 words. So shorter than a full-length book, which would be around 60,000 to maybe 80 or 90,000 words. And those are also published in hardback and ebook, and a really great opportunity to sort of try it out if you're thinking of publishing your first book. We also do handbooks, which are the big reference volumes, which cover all the different areas of a particular large topic. So the example here is the Handbook of Islam in Southeast Asia, for example. That would be a big research volume. Or you might have an idea for a textbook for students. You have a course that you think would really benefit from having a course textbook. So you might want to write audiences, which include students, and that's something to think about, and you can talk to your publisher about that as well. And then the final group would be professionals. So you might want to write a book, say, for example, for archaeologists, in which case you're writing a professional book. So we do all of those types of books. I wanted to give you just an example of a few of the Asian Focus series that we have. We have many, and our team is trying to build more and more series all the time. So if you do have an idea for a series, then come to us about that as well. But there's just a few examples, which include the series that we have with the Economic Research Institute for ASEAN and East Asia, which is a fantastic series, the AREA series. But we have a whole host of different series. So again, if you're not sure what series, you can reach out to me and I can give you some suggestions as well, but that's just some examples. So in order to propose a book to Routledge, the first thing you would do would be to send a book proposal, and you can get that from our website. Your book proposal is like a questionnaire, and you just fill in all the information that you have about your book and you send it to somebody like me, Routledge, and we will advise you and guide you and kind of hold your hand through the process. It's not like publishing a journal. You don't just send it to us and we either reject it and accept it. It's much more nuanced. So we will give you some advice and guidance. We'll help you draft a better version of your proposal. And when we're happy with it and you're happy with it, we'll send it to peer review. And the peer reviewers will give you feedback on that. Peer reviewers being experts in the field, often they're Routledge authors. So in terms of doing the proposal, I won't go through the whole thing today, we don't have time, but I would say promote yourself and your idea. We want to know who you are, we want to know a lot about your book idea. Make sure you're giving a full summary of the idea that you've had. Include chapter abstracts and a sample chapter. We're not asking you to write the whole book at this stage, just your ideas and ideally a sample chapter so we can see how you write. And put your best foot forward, try and make sure that you're presenting your proposal as best you can. Book publishing timeline is around 6 months from the point at which you deliver your manuscript to us and for us to actually publish it. But I can talk a little bit more about that later because I'm not sure, I don't want to run out of time. So open access, I said we're one of the largest open access publishers. You may be interested in publishing a book open access. It can lead to fantastic citations and usage. We had some books recently I had a look at that had a 1900% increase in usage from going open access and from having been published in a normal way. So it really does make a big difference. So you may find that your university has some funds available for you. We still do everything the same as we would normally do. We're not guaranteeing you a publication because you can pay for it. It is the same rigorous peer review process, but you can publish a chapter or a whole book open access and the costs are just there. It's worth knowing if you're in Indonesia that there's a 50% discount for Indonesian and other middle-income countries, so that's worth talking to us about. That makes quite a big difference. And if you're publishing your book when you don't have the funding at the time, you can also retrospectively go back and make your book open access with discounts or more as well. We have a fantastic new program which is called Open Access Plus books. So Open Access Plus allows you to have information almost that it's delivered to us, waiting for it to be no waiting for the sort of 6 months program for it to be published in print. It's dynamic. You can evolve and change the data, change the publication. There's underlying data in here. We make sure everything's visible in terms of the data behind something, and we can have open peer review as well. So F1000 is our new platform that we're working with. You'll hear that a lot. We're working with the Research Synergy Foundation in Indonesia to produce an F1000 research platform as a fully open access tool to publish a lot of fantastic Indonesian research. So that's just something to be aware of. It's a new program that Routledge is launching. So Open Access Plus books. Look out for that in the future. Okay, so open access, I've given our information at the bottom. Again, any questions, really happy to tell you more about open access if you need. Last slide, as I think I'm about to be out of time, is just we have this author directions portal, which has got all the information you might need about translating your PhD into a book, how to produce a proposal form that the publisher is going to say yes to, if you want to know about promoting your book, all of the different areas. So write down that address, I'll put it into the chat at the end, and you should be able to find out all the information from there. I've been Katie Peace, I'm the senior publisher, that's my details. Please contact me and I can redirect you to Simon or any of the other editors in the region. But I really do appeal to you to think about, just try with an international publisher. We can turn your proposal around within 2 to 3 months. get you an answer whether it's possible to have your book available to an international market. There is really a downside to trying, and we're really keen to have more, more of the fantastic research from the region published with us. So thank you so much for your time today, and I look forward to hearing all your questions.
Thank you very much, Kathy, for your presentation. It's interesting, and after listening to some of our panelists, I can conclude that book proposal is one of the key points in publication process. Maybe as the famous saying goes, don't judge a book by its cover. But I think here I can definitely say that the publisher will definitely judge the manuscript by the book proposal. Okay. I think, wait, I'll check. So we will begin our question and answer session. So for the participant, if you have any question for our panelists, you can open your microphone and tell directly the question, or you can also write down your question on the chat column. Okay. While waiting for the question, maybe I'd like to talk about more about, there's an interesting thing here about the open review. But before that, is there any question? Do you have any question for the participant? Okay, if not, maybe I'll ask. Okay, so Kathy, it's interesting about one of your slides and your presentation. You said about the open review. I think it's a new thing in a scientific publication process here in Indonesia, because I'm also from the background of publishing house, a scientific publishing house. Here we think that rigorous peer review is one of the key standard if we talk about scientific publication process. But here we still do the blind review process. So it's interesting to know from your perspective. Why do you think it's good to have the open review model?
Thank you. That's a great question. I would just like to say to begin with, it's an option and it's part of the Open Plus Books platform. So it's not the way that we do sort of normal book publishing. We still do a blind peer review process for the majority of books. But the Open Plus Books program is a really new thing that we're trying, really quite exciting. And you can choose not to have open peer review if you don't want to. And the book proposal for the Open Plus book will have been peer reviewed before the book is written. So we still go through the same proposal process for the peer review, so the book proposal, sorry. But then when the manuscript arrives, rather than send it out for a kind of anonymized peer review of the manuscript, we actually publish the book on the website, and it can be published in chapters at a time. It doesn't all have to be published in one go. We have reviewers who know that their comments are going to be visible to the public, and they're also kind of quite invested, knowing that they're going to have to give constructive feedback. The idea being that they probably won't say yes if they feel that they can't say something constructive and useful, and then they will be publishing their feedback, and then the author can post their comments in response to what the author's saying. So there's more of a context around the actual content. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see how it works. It's a new program for us. We're piloting it at the moment. But there's been quite a lot of interest. I think it's part of the F1000 platform I mentioned, which is a journals platform which has open peer review as part of its open journal process. And that's been really very popular. So we're thinking it'll be an interesting experiment to see how well this goes on the book side. But at the moment, the kind of early feedback has been really positive. But yeah, it's, as you say, it's completely new, so we'll see. I feel like Peter wants to say something.
Okay.
Yeah, just a comment. I mean, I think we all of us working in the field know that the peer review system puts, is really a kind of gift economy that academics must participate in. And often they're not getting credit from their universities for being generous with their time in peer review, and that's really too bad. So especially in the pandemic, I think most of us felt the pressure on many academics was even stronger, of various kinds, maybe looking after caregiving at home while trying to work and so on. So the peer review system, I urge university administrators to reward their scholars for participating in that system, as well as only getting the benefit of peer review when the publication is out. And I do believe that, we need a lot of experimentation now in this circumstance to find ways of peer review. So open peer review, I think, is a very, very interesting possibility. Many of us, if your field is rather small and your voice as a scholar is very distinctive, the anonymity is kind of fictional anyway, right? Often scholars figure out, and often they'll go ahead and just tell, if they've written a good review, they'll just say, oh, by the way, I just reviewed your book for Peter or Katie or Alex, and, I gave it a good, or Narumi, and gave it a good review. So, I think it's going to be we will be all watching F1000 with great interest, and other efforts at open peer. Some fields have been open peer review from the start because they were too small or the methods of review were too traceable to one person. So we look forward to more experiments.
Yeah, the other thing that I think is quite exciting about it is the transparency of the data as well, which I know something on the journal side has been going on for a long time, that the sort of transparency in order to allow scientists to kind of replicate and kind of, reproduce results. So the kind of F1000 Open Plus Books platform is kind of the foundation of that, is this kind of, open data and making sure that we're really transparent and visible about the data as well. So we're really, really proud of it. It's really exciting. And the F1000 platform is one to watch. We're learning from the collaboration with them all the time. So thank you.
Yeah, I think I agree with some of the key points that you have delivered. I think it's also a proof that in this pandemic era, vaccine is we can have vaccine like sooner because it's with open review. I think it's the benefit of open review. So when someone is publish their research and someone else is commenting their review result, and then the improvement for the research is so we can see the better result. So I'm also looking forward for a future of open review model. Okay, maybe I have a question here from the participants. So do you have any suggestion, especially for the first time writer? So someone who has not have experience and publishing manuscript, and especially an international publisher. And also, do you also do like a check for their track record, their background? Because we are here, when we are talking about the book proposal, of course, you do not only see their manuscript, but you also see the background of the writers. So maybe Kathy, you want to answer first?
I just wanted to say, everybody does a first book. I mean, not everybody writes a book in the first place, but if you are going to write a book, everybody has to do a first book. So there isn't, from a Routledge perspective, we encourage a lot of first-time authors, and we often will work with people who've done a PhD and are thinking of kind of translating some of the content from their PhD into a monograph, for example. And we do look at your CV, and what we're looking for is that you've done some writing before, that you've written journal articles. Ideally, you've got your PhD, you've contributed some chapters in some edited volumes or a handbook. We're looking to see that you've in terms of writing. But one of the reasons we ask you for a sample of the proposed book is so that we can see how you write. Not just how you write, but so that the peer reviewers can give you constructive and helpful feedback to help improve your writing and help it kind of be possible for you to write that kind of first monograph. But we're very much here to support first-time writers. We will, as I say, you can send us a draft, you can have a conversation at the beginning of the process about what you're thinking of writing. We can give you some support, but not just us, obviously talk to people within your department who maybe have published a book before, ask them their advice on your proposal. There's lots of things you can do. There's a lot of support out there. So you shouldn't feel too anxious and worried about, being a first-time author. And even reviewers will normally be very supportive of somebody who's trying to kind of publish their first book. But you do need to put the effort in. You need to put your own time and the energy and the kind of efforts into making it better. I understand why someone would be anxious about writing their first book, but even the kind of really famous, very, very senior academics who've written multiple books, they all started with the first book at some point. So don't let that be the thing that puts you off.
Okay, thank you very much for the encouragement. So there's always a time for the first timer, yeah. So don't worry. Maybe Alex, you have another perspective.
Yeah, no, I think just echoing what Katie said, and I 100% agree with that. I mean, there's always a maiden voyage, right? So you've got to start somewhere. But I think maybe I can touch a little bit on, converting the PhD thesis into a monograph. And my piece of advice there is please never send your dissertation. Don't send a sample from your dissertation. We want to see that you're thinking about how that dissertation is going to be expanded into a monograph. So I always just say, start with the introduction, rewrite the introduction, and also give yourself a little bit of a break after you've completed your Viva to just take a little bit of a step back and have some distance from the dissertation. Sometimes I encourage first-time book authors that are wanting to do a monograph from their dissertation to also consider co-authoring with a supervisor or another peer in the same field. So then the process can be a little bit less daunting. And the other thing I want to touch on, because I highlighted some book series, is that sometimes series can also be a good home for a first book, because there's a supporting editorial board of scholars you hopefully admire, whose work you've cited and whose work you've drawn from. And often it's not series editors can be great mentors in giving that early feedback. What Katie said, that's why we do proposal reviews of sample chapters, is to get you to think about the work as a whole before you've even written the whole work. So you start with your sample chapter, you get that initial feedback. And again, series editors, they wanting to encourage emerging scholars, and they're really supportive in those early stages as well from a subject expertise point of view. And finally, again, just to touch on the co-publishing, because I really was through my slides, didn't I? But look at the co-publishers as well. If you're writing in Bahasa, as I mentioned, we've got co-publishing arrangements with Britain Press and other local presses. And as we know, Britain is supporting copy editing and translation for scholars within the institute, and for scholars who are not writing in, or for whom English is not their native or mother tongue. So you might want to also consider those kind of publishing partnerships that exist. In our China programs, we have a lot of partnerships with sorry, that's my son coming in. We have those co-publishing partnerships to help work with translated projects as well. So explore those options and don't be daunted by it. As Katie said, we're here to help you. We understand that the book proposal can look quite intimidating, but the book proposal is also there to sort of hone your thinking about your readership and what kind of contribution you're hoping to make. So I hope that answers that question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, Mr. Peter.
Just to add to that, I'm very sorry to say that some of our university press colleagues do not welcome first books. And the reason is that libraries, under such pressure now, budgetary pressure, sometimes do not take first books if they believe that the first book is so similar to the thesis, which they can generally get on an open access basis. And in fact, in Canada, for example, librarians, are told not to buy a first book if it's based on a thesis. And so this is problem, I think. But it underscores that the book, if you're going to do the book, I mean, the thesis will be out there. So if you really want to turn the thesis into a book, it's best not to be too mechanistic about it. You really have to understand the thesis is written for 5 people, your committee, they're paid to read your book. You have to show them that you've jumped through all the hoops. So you share all of your process, reading all of what you're supposed to read. You've done all your methodology. Whereas the book for a public, that already trusts that you have your qualifications because you've published the book. You have to tell them from the start what you're saying. You have to put your conclusions as much as possible up front and entice the reader to read through. So a lot of what we do in working with first books is to talk about the narrative of the story in a way of that the way that you bring the reader along. NUS Press still welcomes first books, but we really can only do 2 or 3 a year. So we have a new process now where we look at first books together, and we do also invest more time in working on the proposal and so on with those projects that we think are promising. So yeah, it's the first one. It gets easier maybe after you've done the first one.
Yep, it's easier after you're done the first one. I think that's interesting. Yeah, so but I can conclude that the participant or all people have the same opportunity, whether they are first timer or not, yeah, to have their book published, especially in an international publisher. Okay, I think unfortunately the time is up. But before we end our session, maybe Miss Narumi, do you have another thing, an additional thing you want to add?
Yes, I think many authors want to publish their articles, which they plan to publish their article as a one of the chapter of the book project later. So, if there is anything I can recommend to authors, the authors should check the license and the copyright of the authors. The license and copyright, which each journal, each journal sets at their guidelines before their submissions. I recommend to check the license and copyright points in submission to journal articles. That's all.
Thank you very much.
Very good point.
Yes. Yeah, very good point. Okay, I think that's all for today's session. I think it's very interesting to hear all of you deliver your presentation. And I hope, so currently we only have a cooperation with Springer, but I hope in the future, Brin Publishing or Brin Press will have another opportunity to expand our collaboration, because we said that in this era of 4.0, collaboration is much more needed. I would like to thank to all speakers. Thank you, Miss Alex, Mr. Peter, Miss Narumi, and Miss Kathy. It has been a very fruitful discussion. And also, I want to thank you for all the participants who have been actively engaged in the session. I think the best way to reach our panelists is by contacting their email through their email, and their slides. They also already provided their contact. So for the participant, if you have any plan to publish your book to Springer, NUS Press, or to Routledge, you can also contact Ms. Narumi. And I think that's all. Thank you, everyone. We really appreciate you being here. Thanks again for joining us. And I hope to see you again next time. Have a good day.
Thanks. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Novi.
Thank you, Ibu Novi, and all the panelists for bringing us to a very insightful discussion today. Thank you all for your participation. After this, we still have the panel session that will start at 9:45. Thank you. See you.
See you.
Bye.